There is a vocal performance on this song that by every logic of the human body should not exist. The show must go on. You've heard it as an anthem, a soaring, defiant wall of sound, the kind of song you put on when you need to keep going, when everything in you wants to stop. It sounds like a man at the absolute height of his powers, indestructible, roaring at the sky. But here is what nobody tells you. When Freddie Mercury walked into the studio to sing it, he was so ill he could barely stand. He was dying, and he knew it, and almost no one in the world did. His body was failing him. His own guitarist looked at the towering, punishing vocal he'd written and quietly feared that Freddie simply would not be able to physically sing it. And what happened next is one of the most extraordinary acts of will in the history of recorded music. This is the story of how a man with almost nothing left summoned the greatest vocal of his life, turned his own ending into an anthem for everyone else, and said goodbye to the world in a song most people dance to, without ever realizing what they were hearing.
To understand what this song really is, you have to understand where Freddie was in 1991. By then, the truth he had guarded so fiercely was closing in. He was living with AIDS, in an era when that word carried terror and cruelty, and he had made a decision that tells you everything about him. He would not become a headline. He would not let his illness become the story. He would keep working for exactly as long as his body would let him. Inside the band they knew, and so they did something quietly heroic. They went into the studio and they raced. Brian May, Roger Taylor, John Deacon, and Freddie set out to record as much music as they possibly could while he was still able, banking songs against a future they all understood was coming. Some days Freddie could give hours, some days he could barely give minutes, but when he was there, by every account, he was fearless. He would tell the others to keep writing, keep going, give him more to sing, and he would drink it in like a man determined to pour every last thing he had onto tape. He was not making a farewell record on purpose. He was refusing, with everything left in him, to stop being who he was. And into the middle of that, Brian May brought a song that would become the hardest and most important thing Freddie ever sang.
Brian had been carrying an idea. He'd been watching his friend do something almost unbearable to witness. Get up, put on the performer, and carry on as though the ground were not disappearing beneath him. And Brian began to build a song about exactly that. About a man behind a mask, painting on a smile, going out to face the lights one more time because that is simply what he does, whatever it costs. Musically, he made it enormous. A dark, climbing chord sequence, a sense of storm gathering, and a vocal line that reaches higher and higher, demanding more and more power as it goes. It was ambitious to the point of cruelty. This was not an easy song to sing for a healthy man in his prime. And that, by Brian's own account, is where the fear crept in. He had written this towering thing, this monument, and now he had to bring it to a friend whose body was betraying him and ask him to climb it. There was a real question hanging in the room, unspoken and terrible. Could Freddie actually do this? Was it even fair to ask? Brian has said he worried the song might be beyond him now, that the range and the sheer force it needed might be more than Freddie had left to give. He brought it to him anyway, and Freddie's answer became legend.
Because Freddie looked at it, understood exactly what it was asking of him, and refused to be beaten by it. The story, told by Brian May many times since, has become one of the most quietly devastating moments in the band's history. Freddie listened to the song. He knew how hard it was. He knew the state of his own body. And, reportedly, he simply said, "I'll fucking do it, darling." Then, by Brian's account, he steadied himself with a shot of vodka, walked up to the microphone, and sang. Not carefully, not cautiously. He went straight at it, full force, holding nothing back, pouring everything that was left in him into that vocal. And he delivered it. That soaring, impossible, thunderous performance, the one that sounds like a man who could tear down a building, was sung by someone who moments earlier could barely stay on his feet. Reportedly, it took only a take or two. Think about what that actually means. Every ounce of strength his failing body still had, he gathered up and spent, willingly, on a piece of music. Not to save himself, he knew he could not be saved. He did it because the song demanded greatness, and giving less than greatness was something Freddie Mercury was simply not prepared to do, even at the very end. The performance is a miracle, and it is a heartbreak. And it is both at once.
Now, listen to what he was actually singing. Because once you know, the whole song turns inside out. On the surface, it is about a performer, the man who goes on stage no matter what, who hides his pain behind the show, who keeps smiling because the audience is waiting and the lights are on and stopping is not an option. It's a song about the mask. But of course, it was never only about that. Freddie was singing about a man carrying on through something unbearable, keeping his suffering hidden from the world, refusing to let anyone see him fall. He was singing his own life. He was describing in the third person exactly what he was doing in that very studio, in that very body, at that very moment. And here is the extraordinary thing. He never said so. He didn't turn it into a confession or a plea for sympathy. He wrapped his private catastrophe inside a universal anthem, made it something anyone could reach for on their own worst day, and handed it to the world with the mask still perfectly in place. That is a kind of courage most of us will never be asked to find. To take the very thing that is destroying you and transform it into strength for strangers you will never meet. He gave away the one thing he had left, and he made it sound like triumph.
And almost no one knew. That's the part that still stuns people. The Show Must Go On came out as a single in October of 1991, and the world did not officially know that Freddie Mercury was dying. There were rumours, of course. There had been for a while. The press had been circling. The speculation had been cruel. But Freddie had never confirmed anything, had never given them the admission they wanted, had guarded his private life like the fortress it was. So most people heard the song the way you'd expect. A big, dramatic, powerful Queen single. Another towering performance from a man who always delivered towering performances. They had no idea they were listening to a goodbye. The people who did know, the band, the ones closest to him, heard something almost too painful to bear. Every soaring line was a man they loved spending himself in front of them, on purpose, while he still could. Freddie finally confirmed the truth in a public statement on the 23rd of November 1991. He died the very next day. The show, the one he had insisted must go on, had gone on for exactly as long as he could make it, and not one day longer. He had told the world what was happening, only when there was no more performance left to give.
And so a song that was written as an act of love became almost overnight an epitaph. When Freddie died, The Show Must Go On stopped being just a great Queen single and became something else entirely. It became the last word, the final defiant statement of a man who had refused to let anything, even death, take his stage from him before he was ready to leave it. Suddenly, every line meant more than anyone had realized. The title alone became almost unbearable, because he had meant it. He really had kept the show going, right to the edge, and then stepped off it on his own terms, having given everything. The song took on a second life it was never designed for. It became the thing people reach for at endings, at memorials, at funerals, in the hardest moments of ordinary lives, when someone needs to believe they can keep standing, when everything says they can't. Because that is exactly what it is. It is a dying man's proof that a person can find, right at the bottom, when there should be nothing left, one last enormous act of defiance and grace. Brian May built him a monument, and Freddie, with the last real strength in his body, climbed it and stood at the top of it and sang. He turned the worst thing that can happen to a person into a gift for everyone it would ever happen to.
So why does this song still take the breath out of people decades later? Why does it land differently from almost anything else in music? I think it's because we can hear the truth in it, even before we know the story. There is something in that vocal, some quality underneath the power, that tells you it cost the singer something real. It isn't performance for its own sake. It's a man reaching past his own limit, and you can feel the reaching. And when you learn what was actually happening, when you understand that the indestructible voice belonged to a body that was failing, that the man roaring about carrying on could barely walk, the song doesn't become sadder exactly. It becomes something bigger than sad. It becomes defiance, pure, luminous, unbroken defiance in the face of the one thing none of us escapes. Freddie Mercury did not go quietly, and he did not go bitterly. He went singing at full volume, having decided that his last act would be one of generosity and strength rather than fear. That's why it endures, not because it's sad, but because it's brave. It's the sound of a human being refusing to be diminished, and choosing at the very end to give rather than to take. Most of us can only hope to face our worst moment with a fraction of that grace.
So the next time The Show Must Go On comes on, and it lifts you the way it always does, listen for the man underneath the anthem. Not the untouchable rock god, the person, the one who could barely stand, who steadied himself and walked to the microphone anyway, who took the last of what he had and spent all of it on a gift for people he would never meet. He knew the show was ending. He made sure it ended on his terms, at full height, with the mask on and the voice soaring, and nobody watching him fall. Freddie Mercury turned his own goodbye into the most life-affirming song imaginable, and then he was gone, and he left it here for us to keep. That's not just a great record. That's a man teaching us, one final time, how to stand up when there is every reason to lie down. If you'd like to hear the real stories behind the songs you thought you already knew, stay with us. There's a whole catalogue of them, and every single one hides a piece of the truth. The next time you listen, remember that the strongest voice you've ever heard belonged to a man with almost nothing left, who decided to give it away anyway.